The war between the Veloran Empire and the Krythan Dominion had lasted for 417 years. Across 1,000 star systems, their fleets clashed in battles that shattered moons and turned planets into burning graves. The galaxy had grown accustomed to this eternal conflict, the way one grows accustomed to distant thunder that never quite fades. Other civilizations watched from the safety of their borders, careful to remain neutral, careful to avoid being drawn into a war that had already consumed 200 billion lives. Ambassador Kyrath of the Veloran Empire stood before the Galactic Council, his 4 eyes dimmed with exhaustion. His silver robes hung loose on a frame that had grown thin from centuries of stress and sleepless cycles. Behind him, holographic displays showed the current state of the war. Red zones marked Krythan territory, blue marked Veloran space, and between them stretched a band of destroyed worlds, dead stars, and the wreckage of countless ships. "We are dying," Kyrath said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "Both sides are dying. The Krythan Dominion has lost 60% of their population. We have lost 53% of ours. Our economies are shattered. Our birth rates have collapsed. Our technology has stagnated because every resource goes to building weapons." The council members listened in silence. Representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline to forms that defied easy description. They had heard similar speeches before. For 4 centuries, they had heard pleas for intervention, for mediation, for anything that might end the bloodshed. "We have come to beg," Kyrath continued, "not for soldiers, not for weapons. We ask only for mediation, someone to stand between us, someone both sides might listen to." Elder Thromian of the Quarath Collective rose from his seat. His massive form, covered in bioluminescent patches that shifted with his emotions, moved slowly toward the speaker's platform. "Ambassador, we have offered mediation 17 times over the past 3 centuries. Each time, one side or the other has rejected our proposals. What makes you believe this time will be different?" "Because this time," Kyrath said, "the Krythan Dominion has agreed to participate." A murmur ran through the council chamber. This was unexpected. The Krythan had always been the more aggressive party. The ones who had launched the war's first strike, the ones who had refused every peace offering with contempt. "They have agreed," Kyrath explained, "because they are as desperate as we are. Their homeworld sun is dying. They have perhaps 50 years before it collapses. 50 years to relocate 17 billion people. They cannot do this while fighting a war." Elder Thromian's bioluminescent patches shifted to a thoughtful purple. "This is significant news. However, the question remains, who would serve as mediator? Every civilization here has some connection to one side or the other. Trade agreements, historical alliances, territorial disputes. None of us can claim true neutrality." "What about the humans?" someone called out. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned toward the far corner of the council chamber, where a small delegation sat in seats that had been empty for decades. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 12 years ago, after their first successful faster-than-light test. They were so new to interstellar affairs that most civilizations had barely registered their existence. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood up slowly. She was a small woman by galactic standards, barely 2 meters tall, including the heels of her formal shoes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her face showed the kind of calm patience that came from extensive diplomatic training. "We would be willing to serve as mediators," she said. "Earth has no treaties with either the Veloran Empire or the Krythan Dominion. We have no territorial claims anywhere near the conflict zone. We have traded with neither side and have no economic interests at stake." Kyrath studied the human with open curiosity. "Your species is very young. You have been traveling between stars for barely a generation. Do you truly believe you can understand a conflict that has lasted longer than your recorded history? Chen smiled slightly. Ambassador, human recorded history is approximately 6,000 years old. In that time, we have fought thousands of wars. We have committed genocides and recovered from them. We have built empires and watched them fall. We have used nuclear weapons on our own population and survived. We have experienced every horror that war can bring, and we have learned from each one. Perhaps our youth gives us perspective that older species have lost. The Krythan representative, a being named Vorthax, whose scales had turned gray with age and whose cybernetic eye implants whirred as they focused on Chen, spoke for the first time. The human speaks boldly for one whose species has not yet proven itself on the galactic stage. Bold words are free, Chen replied. Results are what matter. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. The council voted. After 4 hours of debate, the motion passed. Humanity would serve as mediators in the Velaran-Krythan War. A neutral station was established in deep space, far from any contested territory. Representatives from both sides agreed to meet there in 30 standard days. Chen returned to Earth to report to the United Nations Security Council. The meeting was held in a bunker beneath Geneva, attended by the leaders of every major nation on Earth and dozens of military advisors. This is an opportunity, Chen explained, but also a danger. If we fail, humanity will be seen as incompetent children playing at galactic politics. If we succeed, we establish ourselves as a neutral power capable of solving problems that have stumped older civilizations. General Marcus Webb, representing the combined Earth Defense Forces, leaned forward. What resources do we have? What leverage? Almost none, Chen admitted. We have a small fleet of 12 warships, none of which could survive a direct engagement with either Valoran or Krythan forces. We have no economic power to speak of. We have no military strength that would impress either side. Then how do we succeed? Asked Secretary General Amara Okonkwo. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the history of human warfare. Images flashed across the screen. Ancient battles fought with swords and spears, medieval sieges, the trenches of World War I, the atomic devastation of World War II, the brief but bloody conflicts of the 21st century. We succeed, Chen said, by understanding something that neither the Velarans nor the Krythans seem to understand. War is not about winning. War is about making your enemy too tired to fight anymore. Both sides have been trying to win for 400 years. Neither has succeeded because they are too evenly matched. They need someone to show them how to stop. The mediation began badly. Krythan Ambassador Vorthax arrived with a list of demands that would have required the Valorans to surrender half their remaining territory. Velaran Ambassador Kyrath responded with counter-demands that would have required the Krythans to pay reparations equal to 3 centuries of their total economic output. Chen listened to both sides for 6 days. She took notes. She asked clarifying questions. She never argued or pushed back, simply absorbing everything both parties said. On the 7th day, she called a private meeting with both ambassadors. "I have studied your conflict," she said. "I have read every treaty, every declaration of war, every failed peace negotiation from the past 4 centuries, and I have come to a conclusion that I believe you both already know but are afraid to admit." Vorthax's scales rippled with irritation. "And what conclusion is that, human? Neither of you can win. Neither of you can lose. You are locked in a spiral that will continue until both civilizations are extinct. Your children's children will die fighting a war that their great-great-grandparents started. Is that what you want? Is that the legacy you wish to leave?" Kyrath's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "You speak as if there is another option." "There is always another option," Chen said. but it requires something that neither of you have been willing to offer. It requires trust. Trust? Vorthax laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. You ask us to trust beings who have killed billions of our people? No, Chen said. I ask you to trust me. I ask you to trust humanity. We have no stake in this conflict. We have nothing to gain from either side winning. All we want is for the killing to stop. She produced 2 data tablets and placed them on the table. These tablets contain a proposal. I am going to leave the room. I want each of you to read the proposal alone, without the other present. Tomorrow, we will meet again and discuss it. Chen left the room. The security systems recorded what happened next. Both ambassadors sat in silence for a long time. Then slowly, they picked up their tablets and began to read. The proposal was radical. It called for a complete cessation of hostilities within 30 days. It called for the establishment of a joint Valoran-Crythan territory in the dead zone between their empires, administered by a neutral council. It called for shared access to the resources needed to relocate the Crythan population before their sun collapsed. And it called for something else entirely unexpected. It called for human military forces to serve as peacekeepers during the transition. Not many forces, just enough to maintain order during the most critical phases of the ceasefire. When the ambassadors returned the next day, their expressions had changed. The hostility was still there, buried deep, but above it was something new, something that might have been hope. Your proposal is interesting, Kyrath said carefully, but it raises questions. You offer human peacekeepers. We have seen the specifications of your warships. They are barely capable of interstellar travel. How could they possibly maintain peace between 2 civilizations that have been fighting for centuries? Chen nodded. You are correct that our ships are not impressive by your standards. But peacekeeping is not about firepower. It is about presence. It is about having someone neutral standing between the 2 sides, someone who will report violations honestly, someone who has no incentive to favor one side over the other. Vorthax's cybernetic eyes whirred. And if one side attacks your peacekeepers, what then? Then you will have made an enemy of humanity, Chen said simply. And while we may not be powerful now, we are very good at holding grudges. Human memory is long, human patience is endless, and human determination, once awakened, does not sleep. The negotiations continued for another 20 days. Details were hammered out. Territorial boundaries were drawn, resource-sharing agreements were drafted, and slowly, reluctantly, both sides began to believe that peace might actually be possible. On the final day, before the treaty was signed, Vorthax asked Chen a question that had been bothering him throughout the negotiations. Why? He said. Why does humanity care about our war? You have nothing to gain from peace. You could have sat back and watched us destroy each other, then expanded into the territory we left behind. That is what most young civilizations would do. Chen considered the question carefully before answering. Because we have been where you are, she said. Multiple times in our history, we have stood on the edge of extinction. We have aimed weapons at each other that could have ended all life on our planet, and each time we pulled back. Not because we were wise, not because we were good, but because we learned that some victories are not worth winning. She paused, looking out the window at the stars beyond. The galaxy is vast and old. We are small and young, but we believe that our smallness gives us perspective. We have not yet grown so large that we have forgotten what it means to be afraid, and fear, properly applied, can be the beginning of wisdom. The treaty was signed. The war that had lasted 417 years ended not with a final battle, but with a simple ceremony. 2 signatures on a document. 2 civilizations stepping back from the abyss, and humanity, the youngest species in the Galactic Council, had achieved something that 37 older civilizations had failed to accomplish. They had brought peace to a galaxy that had forgotten what peace looked like. But the story was not over. Peace, as humanity knew better than anyone, was not the end of conflict. It was merely the beginning of a different kind of struggle, and in the months that followed, humanity would be tested in ways that no one had anticipated. The human peacekeeping force arrived at the neutral station 3 weeks after the treaty signing. They were a small group, just 500 soldiers from a dozen different Earth nations, chosen for their experience in peacekeeping operations and their ability to work under extreme pressure. Their commander was Colonel James Okafor, a veteran of 3 conflicts on Earth and the first human to complete the Galactic Council's military observer training program. Okafor stood on the observation deck of the station, watching as Valoran and Krythan ships moved through the demilitarized zone. For the first time in 4 centuries, they were not shooting at each other. They were delivering supplies, relocating civilians, beginning the long process of healing. "It almost seems too easy," said Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Okafor's second in command. 400 years of war, and we ended it in 30 days of negotiations." Okafor shook his head. "We did not end anything. We gave them permission to stop. There is a difference. The real work begins now, keeping them from starting again." He was right. The challenges came quickly: border disputes over resource deposits that both sides claimed, accusations of treaty violations, assassination attempts on officials from both governments by extremists who did not want peace. Each crisis required delicate handling, careful investigation, and the kind of patient diplomacy that humans had perfected over millennia of internal conflicts. But there were successes too. A joint Valoran-Krythan scientific team completed the first survey of the dead zone, cataloging resources that could benefit both civilizations. Cultural exchange programs brought young people from both species together for the first time, planting seeds of understanding that might grow into something greater. And slowly, reluctantly, the old hatreds began to fade. 6 months after the treaty signing, Ambassador Chen received a message from the Galactic Council. A new crisis was developing. The Tharn hegemony, a civilization that had remained neutral during the Valoran-Krythan War, was threatening to invade a smaller species called the Nalith. The Council wanted humanity to mediate. Chen smiled as she read the message. Humanity's reputation was growing. They were becoming known as problem solvers, as beings who could see solutions where others saw only conflict. It was a reputation earned through blood and wisdom, through thousands of years of learning from their own mistakes. But Chen also knew that reputation was fragile. One failure could destroy everything they had built. One wrong move could turn humanity from respected mediators into galactic laughingstocks. She drafted her response carefully, accepting the assignment but requesting more information about the specific issues at stake. The galaxy was watching humanity now. They could not afford to disappoint. The Tharn hegemony had been expanding for 3,000 years. They were not cruel by nature, not evil in the way that some species could be. They simply believed with absolute conviction that they were superior to every other form of life in the galaxy. Their technology was advanced, their military was powerful, their culture was ancient and refined, and they saw smaller civilizations not as equals, but as resources to be harvested, populations to be absorbed, territories to be claimed. The Nalith were everything the Tharn despised. Small in number, barely 50 million individuals scattered across a dozen colony worlds. Technologically primitive by galactic standards, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 8 decades before humanity. They were artists and philosophers, farmers and craftsmen, a gentle people who had never fought a war because they had never needed to. Their worlds were beautiful but resource-poor, their ships barely capable of interstellar commerce. But the Nalith had something the Tharn wanted desperately. Their home system contained the only known deposits of crystallized neutronium, a substance so rare and so valuable that a single kilogram was worth more than an entire fleet of warships. The Tharn had offered to buy the deposits. The Nalith had refused. Now the Tharn were preparing to take what they could not purchase. Ambassador Chen arrived at the Galactic Council station aboard the human diplomatic vessel Hope's Light, a small ship that carried no weapons beyond basic defensive screens. With her came a team of 12 diplomats, 3 military advisors, and Colonel Okafor, who had been promoted to lead humanity's growing peacekeeping division. The Tharn delegation was already waiting. High Commander Zeth Vor stood at the center of his group, his tall frame wrapped in ceremonial armor that gleamed with medals earned in 100 conquests. His eyes, cold and calculating, studied the human delegation with barely concealed contempt. "You are the famous humans," Zeth Vor said. "The children who ended the Valoran-Krithan War with words instead of weapons. Tell me, Ambassador, do you believe words will work with the Tharn hegemony?" Chen bowed respectfully. "I believe words are always worth trying first, High Commander. They cost nothing and can accomplish much." Zeth Vor laughed. "Words cost time. And time is something the Nalith do not have. In 7 days, our fleet will enter their system. They will surrender their neutronium deposits or they will be destroyed. This is not negotiable." "Everything is negotiable," Chen said calmly. "Even things that seem absolute have room for discussion. Perhaps we could find a solution that benefits both parties." The Nalith delegation entered the chamber. Their leader, Elder Sorath, was an elderly being whose feathers had faded to pale gray with age. She walked slowly, supported by 2 younger Nalith, her large eyes taking in the scene with a mixture of fear and dignity. "We will not surrender our birthright," Sorath said, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "The crystallized neutronium is sacred to our people. It is not a resource to be bought and sold. It is a gift from the universe itself, and we are merely its guardians." Zeth Vor's expression hardened. "Then you choose extinction. So be it." "Wait," Chen said. "High Commander Elder Sorath, I ask for 1 week. 1 week of negotiations before any military action is taken. Surely that is not too much to ask." Zeth Vor considered. His fleet was already mobilized, already in position. A week would change nothing militarily. But refusing the human request might cost him politically, might make the Tharn look unreasonable in the eyes of the Galactic Council. 1 week, he agreed. But no longer. And if at the end of that week the Nalith still refuse to cooperate, nothing you say will stop what comes next. The negotiations began the next morning. Chen had spent the night studying everything humanity knew about both civilizations, looking for leverage, looking for common ground, looking for anything that might prevent a massacre. The Nalith were easy to understand. They were pacifists, not by ideology but by nature. Violence was simply not part of their cultural vocabulary. They had never developed weapons because they had never needed them. Their society was based on cooperation, on shared resources, on the belief that all beings could coexist peacefully if they simply chose to do so. The Tharn were more complex. Their empire had been built through conquest, yes, but also through integration. Species they absorbed were not enslaved but assimilated, given citizenship and rights within the hegemony. They were not monsters. They simply believed that their way of life was superior to all others and that bringing other species into their civilization was a kindness, not a cruelty. Chen saw an opportunity in this contradiction. The Tharn did not want to destroy the Nalith. They wanted the neutronium, certainly, but they also wanted the Nalith themselves, their artists and philosophers, their unique perspective on the universe. Destruction would give them the resources, but cost them something potentially more valuable. She approached Zeth Vor privately on the 3rd day. "High Commander, may I speak frankly?" Zeth Vor nodded. Speak. You do not actually want to destroy the Nalith. Destruction is wasteful. It gains you nothing but the neutronium deposits, and those deposits will be worth far less if you have to extract them from a radioactive wasteland. Szeth Vor's eyes narrowed. You presume much, human. I presume nothing. I observe. Your speeches to the Council talk of conquest, but your military deployments suggest containment. You have surrounded the Nalith system, but positioned your ships to prevent escape, not to attack. You want them to surrender, not to die. For a long moment, Szeth Vor was silent. Then, slowly, he nodded. You are more observant than I expected. Yes, destruction is wasteful. But the Nalith leave us no choice. They will not sell, will not trade, will not negotiate. What option remains but force? Partnership, Chen said. Szeth Vor laughed. The Nalith will never agree to join the hegemony. They are too proud, too attached to their independence. Not partnership with the hegemony, Chen clarified. Partnership with all of us. What if the neutronium deposits were placed under the protection of the Galactic Council? What if extraction rights were shared among all member civilizations, with the Nalith receiving a percentage as the guardians of the resource? The proposal was unexpected. Szeth Vor considered it carefully, running calculations in his head. The Tharn would not get exclusive access to the neutronium, but they would get access, and they would avoid the cost of a war that, while winnable, would still consume resources and lives. This proposal would require the approval of the Galactic Council, Szeth Vor said, and the Nalith would never agree. Let me worry about the Nalith, Chen said. And as for the Council, I believe they would approve any solution that prevents another war so soon after the last one ended. Chen's meeting with Elder Sorath was more difficult. The Nalith leader listened to the proposal with her large eyes closed, her feathers ruffling with emotion. You ask us to share what is sacred, Sorath said. You ask us to let strangers dig into our worlds, extract what they desire, treat our holy sites as nothing more than mines. I ask you to survive, Chen replied. Elder, I understand your beliefs. I respect them. But the Tharn will come whether you agree to this proposal or not. If you refuse, they will take the neutronium anyway, and they will take your people as well. This way, you maintain some control. You remain the guardians, even if you share the guardianship with others. Sorath opened her eyes. And if we resist? If we fight? Chen's expression grew sad. Then you will die. All of you. The Tharn fleet is overwhelming and you have no weapons capable of even slowing them down. Your people will be remembered as martyrs, but they will not be remembered for long. The galaxy forgets quickly. And if we accept this proposal, what then? Then your people survive. Your culture survives. Your sacred sites are preserved, merely shared. It is not ideal. It is not what you deserve. But it is life. And life, Elder, is always worth choosing. The negotiations continued. Details were hammered out. The Galactic Council agreed to establish a joint administration for the neutronium deposits, with extraction rights divided among member civilizations based on population and need. The Nalith would receive 15% of all extracted materials as a royalty, enough to fund their civilization for millennia. And they would retain veto power over any extraction that threatened their sacred sites. The Tharn were not entirely satisfied. They had wanted exclusive access, and they were getting only a share. But Szeth Vor recognized the wisdom of the compromise. War was expensive. Peace, even an imperfect peace, was cheaper. On the 6th day, both sides agreed to the terms. The treaty was signed in a ceremony that Ambassador Chen had carefully designed to honor both civilizations. Tharn military music played alongside Nalith spiritual hymns. Banners of both species hung side by side, and at the center of it all stood humanity's diplomatic team, the architects of a peace that no one had believed possible. But something unexpected happened during the ceremony, something that would change everything. A Tharn warship, commanded by an officer named Sub-Commander Krath, who opposed the treaty, broke from the fleet and fired on the Nalith delegation's transport vessel. The ship's shields held, but the attack was clear. It was an assassination attempt, a violation of every diplomatic protocol known to galactic civilization. Colonel Okafor moved faster than anyone expected. He had positioned his small team of peacekeepers around the ceremony hall, not because he expected trouble, but because he had learned never to expect anything else. His soldiers reached the transport vessel's controls and returned fire before the Tharn ship could adjust for a second shot. The human weapons were not powerful. Their ship-mounted lasers were barely capable of scratching the Tharn vessel's armor. But Okafor had not targeted the armor. He had targeted the ship's communication array, blinding it, isolating it from the rest of the fleet. "Hi, Commander," Okafor said into the communication channel, his voice calm despite the chaos. "One of your ships has just fired on a civilian vessel during a diplomatic ceremony. I have disabled its communications to prevent coordination with other hostile elements. I recommend you take immediate action." Zethvor's response was swift. Within minutes, loyal Tharn vessels had surrounded the rogue ship. Sub-Commander Krath was taken into custody. The crisis was over almost before it had begun. But the galaxy had noticed something. The humans, with their primitive weapons and their tiny fleet, had responded to a crisis faster than anyone else. They had acted decisively, effectively, and without hesitation. And they had done so not to kill, but to prevent killing, not to destroy, but to preserve. Elder Sorath approached Chen after the ceremony. The elderly Nalith's feathers were still ruffled from the shock of the attack, but her eyes held something new, something that looked like hope. "Your people saved us," Sorath said, "twice now, first with words and then with action. Why? What do you gain from protecting those who cannot protect themselves?" Chen considered the question. It was the same question she had been asked by every civilization humanity had helped, and she still was not sure she had a perfect answer. "Because we were helpless once," she said finally. "For most of our history, we were at the mercy of forces we could not control. Diseases, natural disasters, our own worst impulses. We survived not because we were strong, but because we helped each other. And somewhere along the way, helping became part of who we are." The incident with Sub-Commander Krath had consequences beyond the immediate crisis. The Galactic Council, impressed by humanity's swift response, formally requested that Earth establish a permanent peacekeeping force. Not a military, not an army, but something new. A rapid response unit that could intervene in crises before they spiraled out of control. Colonel Okafor was promoted to general and placed in command of the new Earth Peacekeeping Corps. His first task was recruitment. He needed soldiers who could fight but preferred not to, diplomats who could negotiate under fire, scientists who could assess threats and find solutions in seconds rather than hours. He needed the best humanity had to offer. The response was overwhelming. Applications poured in from every nation on Earth, from every walk of life. Veterans and pacifists, teachers and engineers, artists and athletes, all of them united by a single belief: that humanity's role in the galaxy was not to conquer, but to protect. 6 months after the Nalith crisis, the Earth Peacekeeping Corps numbered 10,000 members stationed across 30 systems. They were still small by galactic standards, still primitive in their technology, still young in their experience, but they were making a difference. And then the real crisis came. The message arrived at 0300 hours Earth Standard Time. General Okafor was asleep in his quarters aboard the peacekeeping flagship Unity when his communications system lit up with priority alerts. "General," said his aide, Lieutenant Commander Rosa Martinez, her voice tight with controlled panic, "we have a situation. The Valorans and the Krythons are mobilizing." Okafor was fully awake in an instant. "What?" The treaty has held for over a year. What happened? We are not sure, sir. Both fleets are moving toward the neutral zone. Both sides are claiming the other violated the ceasefire. And General, there is something else. The Tharn hegemony has declared support for the Veloran position. Half a dozen other civilizations are choosing sides. If this escalates, we are looking at a galactic war. Okafor dressed quickly and made his way to the bridge. The main display showed the situation in stark detail. Red markers for Krythan ships, blue for Veloran, yellow for Tharn, and scattered across the map, tiny green dots representing Earth peacekeeping vessels. How long until the fleets reach engagement range? Okafor asked. 5 hours, sir. Maybe less if either side accelerates. 5 hours. In 5 hours, the peace that humanity had worked so hard to build could collapse into the worst war the galaxy had ever seen. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that the Earth Peacekeeping Corps could do to stop it militarily. Get me Ambassador Chen, Okafor said, and start moving all our vessels toward the neutral zone. If we cannot stop this, at least we can witness it. Chen's face appeared on the communication screen moments later. She was already dressed, already alert, already working the problem. I have been in contact with both ambassadors, she said. Neither side knows what triggered this. Both received intelligence reports claiming the other was preparing an attack. The reports were detailed, specific, and apparently credible. Someone fed them false intelligence, Okafor said. Yes, someone who wants this war to happen. Someone who benefits from chaos. Who? Chen shook her head. I do not know yet, but I have a suspicion. The Tharn were very quick to declare support for the Velorans. Too quick. And Sub-Commander Krath, the one who attacked the Nalith transport, he was released from custody last month. Officially rehabilitated. Unofficially, he is still a fanatic who thinks war is the answer to everything, Okafor finished. You think he orchestrated this? I think he had help. I think there are elements in multiple civilizations who see humanity's peacekeeping efforts as a threat. If they can prove that our peace does not hold, that war is inevitable, then they discredit everything we have built. Okafor looked at the map again. 5 hours. Less now. The fleets were accelerating. What do we do? He asked. Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was a dangerous smile, the kind of smile that came from having no good options and choosing to act anyway. We do what humans have always done, she said. We improvise. The plan was desperate, foolish, and probably suicidal. It was also the only plan they had. Ambassador Chen and General Okafor would take a single ship, unarmed, into the neutral zone directly between the two approaching fleets. They would broadcast on all frequencies, demanding that both sides stand down, and they would present evidence hurriedly gathered but convincing that the intelligence reports were fabricated. They might shoot us, Okafor pointed out. They might, Chen agreed, but they might also listen, and if we do not try, they will definitely shoot each other. The Unity accelerated toward the neutral zone, leaving the rest of the peacekeeping fleet behind. As they traveled, Chen's team worked frantically to compile their evidence. Communication intercepts that showed the false reports originating from a source within Tharn space. Financial records linking Sub-Commander Krath to a network of war profiteers across multiple civilizations. Testimony from informants who had been promised rewards for helping start a war. It was not perfect evidence. It was not complete. But it was enough to create doubt. And doubt, Chen knew, was sometimes more powerful than certainty. They reached the neutral zone with 45 minutes to spare. The Unity positioned itself directly in the path of both fleets, a tiny speck of metal and hope floating in the vast darkness between two tidal waves of destruction. This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth, Chen broadcast, her voice carrying across light years of space. To all ships in this sector, I am requesting an immediate halt to all military movement. I have evidence that both the Valoran Empire and the Krythan Dominion have been manipulated. You are about to start a war based on lies." For a long moment there was only silence. Then, slowly, responses began to come in. Questions, demands for proof, accusations and counter-accusations. But the fleets had stopped moving. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Ambassador Chen stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the tactical display as thousands of warships from 2 civilizations held their positions. Behind her team continued to compile evidence, refining their presentation, preparing for the moment when they would have to convince 2 ancient enemies that they had been played against each other. General Okafor stood at the weapons console, though there were no weapons to fire. His presence there was symbolic, a reminder that humanity was willing to put itself in harm's way for the sake of peace. His hands were steady, his expression calm, but Chen knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept flicking to the sensor readings. "The Valoran flagship is hailing us," Lieutenant Commander Martinez announced. "Put them through," Chen said. Ambassador Kyrath's face appeared on the screen. He had aged visibly in the year since the original peace treaty. The strain of maintaining peace almost as exhausting as the strain of waging war. His 4 eyes studied Chen with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Ambassador Chen," Kyrath said, "you make bold claims. You say we have been manipulated. But my intelligence services show clear evidence of Krythan military buildups along our border. Troop movements, weapons production, supply chains activating." "Your intelligence services have been compromised?" Chen replied. "The evidence you received was fabricated. I am transmitting the proof now." She nodded to Martinez, who began sending the compiled data to the Valoran flagship. Financial records showing payments from anonymous sources to Valoran intelligence officers. Communication intercepts revealing the original false reports. A trail that led, step by step, back to Sub-Commander Krath and his network of war profiteers. Kirath studied the data in silence. Minutes passed. The fleets remained motionless, thousands of weapons charged and ready, millions of lives hanging on the decisions of a few individuals. "This evidence," Kyrath said finally, "suggests that some within the Tharn hegemony are responsible for this deception. But the Tharn have declared support for our position. If they wanted war, why would they support us?" "Because they do not want you to win," Chen explained. "They want both of you to lose. A war between Valoran and Krythan would weaken both civilizations, create chaos across the sector, and open opportunities for expansion that the Tharn have been seeking for centuries." A new signal came through. The Krythan flagship was hailing them. "Put them through as well," Chen said. "Both parties should hear this." Vorthax's scaled face appeared on a split screen beside Kyrath. The old Krythan warrior looked even more weathered than before, his cybernetic eyes flickering as they processed the scene before him. "Human," Vorthax said, his voice rough with barely contained anger. "My people stand ready to defend themselves against Valoran aggression. You claim this aggression is fabricated, but I have seen the reports. I have read the intelligence. The Velarans were preparing to strike first." "The same intelligence that told the Velarans you were preparing to strike them," Chen said. "The same intelligence that came from the same source. Both of you received warnings about the other at exactly the same time, with exactly the same level of detail, pushing both of you toward exactly the same response. Does that not seem suspicious to you?" Vorthax was silent. His cybernetic eyes whirred as they analyzed the data Chen's team had sent. "I have also received this evidence," Vorthax admitted. "It is troubling. But it could be fabricated as easily as the original intelligence reports. Why should we trust your version of events over what our own services have told us?" "Because I have nothing to gain from lying to you," Chen said. Humanity has no territorial claims, no economic interests, no political ambitions in this sector. We gain nothing from your peace except peace itself. Can you say the same about whoever provided your original intelligence?" General Okafor stepped forward. "Ambassadors, I have a proposal. Send representatives to the Unity. Let them examine our evidence firsthand. Let them question our sources. Trace our methodology, verify every claim we have made. If after that examination you are still convinced that war is necessary, then we will withdraw and let events take their course. But give us this chance. Give yourselves this chance." The silence returned. Chen could see both ambassadors consulting with their advisors, weighing options, calculating risks. Every second that passed was another second of peace, another moment in which the guns remained silent and lives were not lost. "Agreed," Kirath said finally. "I will send my senior intelligence officer to examine your evidence." "As will I," Vorthax added. "But understand this, humans. If this is a trick, if you are attempting to manipulate us for your own purposes, there will be consequences." "We understand," Chen said. "And we accept that risk." The next 5 hours were the most intense of Chen's career. Representatives from both civilizations arrived on the Unity, accompanied by security details and technical experts. They were given complete access to every piece of evidence humanity had gathered. They questioned the human analysts. They traced communication intercepts back to their sources. They verified financial records against independent databases. And slowly, reluctantly, they began to believe. The breakthrough came when a Valoran cryptanalyst discovered a hidden signature in the fabricated intelligence reports. The signature matched a known Tharn military encryption protocol, one that had been discontinued years ago but was still known to certain veteran officers like Sub-Commander Krath. "It appears," the Valoran said, his 4 eyes wide with the realization, "that we have been deceived." The Krithan representative, a younger officer named Threll who had lost 2 siblings in the original war, nodded slowly. "My analysis confirms this. The timing, the methodology, the specific details that were designed to provoke maximum response. This was not intelligence. This was provocation." Chen felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "Then you will recommend to your governments that the fleets stand down?" Both representatives exchanged glances. Despite everything, despite centuries of hatred and decades of fragile peace, there was something in that exchange that might have been respect. "We will recommend," Threll said, "but our governments must make the final decision." The next hour was agony. Chen waited on the bridge of the Unity as the representatives returned to their flagships, as they briefed their commanders, as those commanders consulted with their governments across vast distances of space. The fleets remained motionless, weapons still charged, the fate of billions still uncertain. And then finally, the message came. "This is Supreme Commander Vorith of the Valoran Imperial Fleet," a voice announced across all channels. "We are standing down. Our fleet will return to Valoran space immediately. We thank the human delegation for their intervention." Moments later, a similar message came from the Krithan side. "The Dominion fleet is withdrawing. We acknowledge that we were deceived. We will investigate the source of this deception and take appropriate action." Chen closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking, she realized. She had not allowed herself to feel the fear until it was over, and now it was catching up with her all at once. "Ambassador," Martinez said softly, "the Galactic Council is requesting an immediate briefing." "Tell them I will be there in 1 hour," Chen replied. "First, I need to sit down." She sat. General Okafor sat beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. They had just prevented a galactic war. They had done it with words and evidence and the willingness to put themselves in harm's way, and they were both too exhausted to feel anything but relief. "That was close," Okafor said finally. Yes, Chen agreed. Too close. Do you think it will happen again? Someone else trying to start a war? Chen considered the question. Almost certainly. Peace is fragile. It requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance. There will always be those who profit from conflict, who see war as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. And what do we do about it? We keep doing what we have been doing. We show up. We listen. We help where we can. And we hope that eventually, the idea of peace becomes stronger than the desire for war. The Unity began its journey back to the peacekeeping station. Behind it, two massive fleets turned away from each other and headed home. Millions of soldiers who had expected to die that day were instead going to sleep in their bunks, eat meals with their friends, and wake up tomorrow to a galaxy that was not on fire. The briefing to the Galactic Council took place 3 days later. Chen stood before the assembled representatives of 39 spacefaring civilizations and explained what had happened. She presented the evidence of the conspiracy. She named Sub-Commander Krath and his network of accomplices, and she offered recommendations for preventing similar incidents in the future. This crisis, Chen concluded, demonstrated both the fragility of peace and the power of cooperation. Two civilizations that had fought each other for 4 centuries were willing to listen, to examine evidence, to change course based on facts rather than fear. That gives me hope. But it also demonstrated how easily that willingness can be exploited by those who prefer conflict to harmony. Elder Thromian of the Quorath Collective rose to speak. Ambassador Chen, humanity has now intervened successfully in 3 major crises: the Valoran-Krythan War, the Tharn-Nalith dispute, and now this conspiracy to restart hostilities. Each time, your species has demonstrated capabilities that seem inconsistent with your technological level. Chen smiled slightly. What capabilities do you mean, Elder? The ability to understand conflict, to see through deception, to find solutions where others see only problems. These are not technical skills, they are something else, something that we older civilizations seem to have lost, or perhaps never had. We call it empathy, Chen said. The ability to understand what others are feeling, to see situations from their perspective, to care about their well-being even when they are very different from us. Humanity developed empathy because we needed it. Our world was harsh, our resources limited, our survival uncertain. We learned that cooperation was more effective than competition, that helping others ultimately helped ourselves. Thromian's bioluminescent patches shifted thoughtfully. And you believe this empathy can be taught? Can be shared? I believe it is already shared, Chen replied. Every civilization in this chamber has shown empathy at one time or another. The problem is that empathy often loses out to fear, to greed, to the simple desire for power. Our job, humanity's job, is to remind people that empathy is still there, that it is still possible to choose understanding over violence. The Council voted to expand humanity's role in galactic peacekeeping. The Earth Peacekeeping Corps would double in size. New training academies would be established on 3 different worlds, and humanity would be given a permanent seat on the Council's Security Committee, a position of influence that no species so young had ever held. But the story did not end there. Stories never really end. They simply pause, waiting for the next chapter to begin. 6 months after the crisis, General Okafor received a visitor at the peacekeeping headquarters on Luna. Sub-Commander Krath, the architect of the conspiracy, had been captured by Tharn authorities and was being held pending trial. But Krath had requested a meeting with the human general, and the Tharn had agreed to allow it. Okafor met Krath in a secure facility, surrounded by guards from 3 different civilizations. The former Tharn officer was a shadow of his former self, his scales dull, his posture defeated. Whatever fire had driven him to attempt starting a galactic war had burned out, leaving only ash behind. General Okafor, Krath said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for agreeing to see me. You tried to start a war that would have killed billions, Okafor replied. Why should I give you anything? Krath was silent for a long moment. Because I want to understand. All my life I believed that war was the natural state of civilizations, that peace was weakness, that conflict was strength. I believed that humanity's peacekeeping efforts were naive, doomed to fail. I believed that by exposing that failure I would be doing the galaxy a service. And now? Now I have had time to think, time to watch what you humans have accomplished, time to realize that perhaps I was wrong. Krath looked up, and there was something in his eyes that might have been genuine curiosity. How do you do it? How do you make peace work? Okafor considered the question carefully. We do not make peace work, he said finally. Peace is not a machine that can be operated. Peace is a choice that has to be made every day by every individual in every civilization. Our job is not to create peace. Our job is to make it easier for others to choose peace. But there will always be those who choose war. Those like me. Yes, and we will stop them when we can. We will fail sometimes. Peace is not guaranteed. It is not certain. It is simply possible, and as long as it is possible, we will keep working toward it. Krath closed his eyes. You humans are very strange, he said. You have no power, no territory, no ancient wisdom. And yet you have accomplished more in 15 years than the Tharn accomplished in 3,000. We had good teachers, Okafor said. Our own history, our own mistakes. Every war humanity ever fought taught us something about how not to fight the next one. We have a lot of practice at learning from failure. The meeting ended. Krath was returned to custody to await trial. Okafor returned to his duties, overseeing a peacekeeping force that had grown from 500 to 5,000 and was still expanding. But he thought about Krath's words for a long time afterward, about power and territory and ancient wisdom, about all the things humanity did not have and all the things they had accomplished anyway. Ambassador Chen retired 3 years later, passing her position to a younger diplomat named Marcus Wu, who had trained under her for a decade. At her retirement ceremony, she was asked to give a speech about humanity's role in the galaxy. She stood before an audience that included representatives from every major civilization, veterans of a dozen crises, and a new generation of human peacekeepers who were just beginning their careers. When humanity entered the galactic community, Chen said, we were children. We knew nothing of interstellar politics, nothing of ancient rivalries, nothing of the complexities that had shaped civilizations for millennia. We came with open eyes and open hands, asking only to learn. But we also came with something else. We came with 5,000 years of history that had taught us painfully and repeatedly that war is not inevitable, that peace is not weakness, that the choice to understand rather than destroy is the most powerful choice any civilization can make. In our time among the stars, we have been tested. We have been doubted. We have been dismissed as naive children playing at diplomacy. And perhaps we are naive. Perhaps we do not understand the galaxy as well as older civilizations do. But we understand something that matters more than ancient wisdom or technological power. We understand that every being in every civilization wants to live, wants to raise their children in safety, wants to see their world thrive, and that this common desire, this shared hope, is stronger than any force that divides us. Chen paused, looking out at the audience. Velarin and Krythan sat side by side. Tharn and Nalith shared tables. Species that had once been enemies were now colleagues, partners, perhaps even friends. Victory took only 5 hours, Chen concluded. 5 hours from the moment our ship entered the neutral zone to the moment both fleets stood down. But that victory was not won in 5 hours. It was won in 5,000 years of human history. In every war we fought and every peace we made, in every mistake we learned from and every triumph we achieved. We are humanity. We are small. We are young. We are weak by galactic standards. But we know something that power cannot teach and wisdom cannot buy. We know that peace is possible, and as long as we believe that, we will keep working to make it real. The applause lasted for a long time. In the years that followed, humanity's role in the galaxy continued to grow. The Earth Peacekeeping Corps expanded to 50,000 members, then 100,000, then more. Human diplomats served as mediators in conflicts across the galaxy. Human scientists collaborated with researchers from 100 civilizations on projects that benefited everyone. Human artists and philosophers contributed to a galactic culture that was richer for their presence. And when crises came, as they always did, humanity was there. Not to conquer, not to dominate, simply to help, to remind the galaxy that peace was possible, that understanding was achievable, that the choice to reach out, rather than strike out, was always available. The Valoran-Krithan peace held. The Nalith flourished under the protection of the galactic community. The Tharn hegemony, humbled by the exposure of their conspiracy, began to reform, slowly transforming from an empire of conquest to an empire of cooperation. And humanity, the youngest species in the Galactic Council, the children who had entered a conflict 400 years old and ended it in 30 days of negotiation, became something more. They became a symbol, a reminder that it is not power that shapes the galaxy, but the choices made by those who hold it. Victory took only 5 hours, but the peace that followed would last for generations. And every time a crisis arose, every time war threatened, every time the darkness of conflict seemed ready to swallow the light of civilization, someone would remember. They would remember the small ship that had positioned itself between two fleets. They would remember the voice of a human ambassador demanding that both sides listen. They would remember that peace was possible, because humanity had proven it. 5 hours to end a potential war. 5,000 years to learn how. And an eternity of hope stretching out before them, waiting to be claimed by anyone brave enough to reach for it. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology, not territory or resources or ancient wisdom. Simply the belief, demonstrated again and again, that the choice for peace was always available to those willing to make it. And that was worth more than all the fleets in the universe.